A Spartan boy stands as a statue, even as a fox hidden beneath his tunic struggles desperately to escape. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't react. He chooses total internal silence over the impulse to move, dying with his secret intact, rather than breaking his resolve. Meanwhile, the average modern man cries out when someone disagrees with him online. He spirals when his internet is slow. He loses sleep because a coworker didn't smile at him in the hallway. He calls this feeling his feeling. The Spartans called it weakness that gets you killed. This wasn't cruelty. This was the agoge, the system that produced the most feared warriors in history. Here's the brutal truth you need to understand. Your emotions aren't yours. They're installed programs running on autopilot. Software written by your childhood, your traumas, your evolutionary biology. You didn't choose them. You inherited them. You're not your feelings. You're the observer of them. And every time you react emotionally, every time you let anger flash or fear paralyze, you hand someone else the leash to your own mind. But before you can break the leash, you have to see the specific backdoor in your biology that manipulators have been exploiting since the day you were born. We'll uncover that exact mechanism in phase 1. You were taught a lie. The modern world told you your feelings are valid. Honor them, express them, let them guide you. This is psychological disarmament. They've convinced you to worship the very mechanism that enslaves you. Your emotions don't serve you. They serve whoever knows how to trigger them. Here's how the mechanism works. Your amygdala, the ancient threat detection center of your brain, scans your environment constantly. But it doesn't scan for what's actually dangerous now. It scans based on past programming, childhood conditioning, trauma, evolutionary biology millions of years old. In 1920, a landmark study proved something disturbing about human psychology. Researchers paired a neutral object with a startling sound. After enough repetitions, the object alone triggered fear. No threat existed. The fear was installed, programmed, written into the operating system. Your fears were conditioned the same way. That neutral object is now your boss's email. The startling sound is now the notification chime. Someone raises their voice and your heart pounds before you've even processed what they said. Your body responds to triggers that were installed decades ago by people who aren't even in your life anymore. Stop. Think about the last time you snapped at someone you love. Was that you? Or was it just a circuit firing because they used a tone of voice your brain associated with a childhood threat? You weren't a person in that moment. You were a biological reflex. This is the backdoor manipulators use, your amygdala. Daniel Goleman called it amygdala hijack. The signal skips your thinking brain entirely. It goes straight to your internal alarm. Adrenaline floods your system before you even know why you're angry. You slam doors, you freeze, you rage, you say things you can't take back. Only afterward do you wonder why you overreacted. You didn't overreact. Your programming executed exactly as designed. The problem is the design, software optimized for threats that no longer exist. Your amygdala can't distinguish between a lion attack and a passive-aggressive email. It fires the same alarm. The Stoics understood this 2,000 years ago. Epictetus taught that men are disturbed not by things but by their views of things. The event doesn't create your emotion, your judgment creates it. Someone insults you, the words are sound waves, air moving. Your judgment that the insult matters, that's what creates the suffering. Here's the recognition. You're not responsible for the initial surge. The amygdala fires, that's automatic. But you're completely responsible for what happens next. The first spark is involuntary. The conflagration is a choice. When you recognize that the anger isn't you, that the fear isn't you, you've seen the cage, and no one breaks free from a cage they can't see. Once you see emotions as external programming, the next question becomes, how do you separate yourself from the code? At age 7, Spartan boys were taken from their families and entered the agoge. They were starved deliberately, forced to steal food to survive, beaten if caught, not for stealing, but for the incompetence of being detected. They were flogged at the temple of Artemis Orthia. This wasn't punishment, it was training. Many were literally whipped to death rather than cry out. The survivors learned something most humans never understand. Pain can be observed without being obeyed. The sensation exists. The reaction is optional. This wasn't sadism. This was the systematic creation of men who could watch their own suffering as spectators rather than victims. Viktor Frankl discovered this same truth under far darker circumstances. Between 1942 and 1945, he was imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps. Everything was stripped from him: family, possessions, dignity, freedom. But one thing remained. In the midst of hell, Frankl realized, between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. They could torture his body. They couldn't force his interpretation. The gap between what happened to him and how he responded to it, that gap was his sovereignty, the last human freedom. Frankl discovered the space between stimulus and response through suffering. But there's a group of men who've learned to physically shrink the alarm center of their brain on command. Neuroscience has validated what Frankl discovered through suffering. In 2007, UCLA researchers found that when people simply labeled their emotions, when they said "I'm experiencing anger," instead of drowning in the feeling, their amygdala activity dropped significantly. The right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain associated with conscious processing and impulse inhibition, became more active. As social neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman explained, when you put feelings into words, you're activating this prefrontal region and seeing a reduced response in the amygdala. It's like hitting the brakes on your emotional responses. Naming the emotion created distance. The brain shifted from reaction to observation. Simply by articulating what you feel, you engage the thinking brain and reduce the hijacking power of the emotional brain. There is anger is fundamentally different from "I am angry." The first positions you as the witness. The second fuses you with the state. The first gives you options. The second makes you a hostage. Zen monks have practiced this for centuries. They call it noting. When a feeling arises, they observe it like a cloud passing through the sky. The cloud moves. The sky remains untouched. They don't fight the emotion. They don't suppress it. They simply watch it arise, exist, and pass without being swept away by it. Modern brain scans confirm what monks knew through practice. Experienced meditators have smaller amygdala responses to negative stimuli. In experiments, seasoned Zen practitioners showed smaller neural responses to upsetting images than control subjects. They weren't more numb. They were less hijacked. The architecture of their brains has been restructured through observation. These monks can undergo pain or stress that would debilitate others while remaining composed. Some have demonstrated control over autonomic functions, slowing their heartbeat, raising their body temperature in extreme cold through meditation alone. The mind has been separated from automatic reaction to such a degree that even the body's involuntary responses can be overridden. Marcus Aurelius ruled Rome from 180–8 AD while barbarians threatened the frontier and plague ravaged the empire. He wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." He wasn't writing philosophy for publication. He was writing reminders to himself, a Roman emperor teaching himself nightly how to remain unmoved. The practice is simple. When emotion surges, name it. This is fear, this is shame, this is rage. Don't suppress it, don't act on it, witness it. You're not the emotion, you're the one observing it. Detachment doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you're no longer hijacked by what you feel. Recognition shows you the code. Detachment separates you from it. But separation alone isn't sovereignty. Now comes the rebuild. The brain has a secret that changes everything: neuroplasticity. In 2000, neuroscientist Eric Kandel won the Nobel Prize for proving that the brain physically rewires itself through experience. In experiments, he showed that learning actually changes the synaptic connections between brain cells. The number of synapses in certain neural pathways increases with learning. Learning can even switch on genes that cause neurons to sprout new connections. When neurons fire together, they wire together. The pathways you use grow stronger. The pathways you abandon grow weaker. This isn't metaphor. This is physical reality. Dendrites extending, synapses forming, circuits strengthening through repetition. Your emotional responses aren't fixed traits, they're circuits. And circuits can be rebuilt through deliberate practice, just as muscles are rebuilt through deliberate exercise. The Spartans understood this intuitively. They didn't just suppress emotion, they reconditioned it. Hunger, cold, pain, fear. These weren't avoided. They were introduced systematically, gradually, until the response itself changed. What would break other men became normal for Spartans. Their threshold for distress was artificially elevated through exposure. This is why they became the most feared warriors in Greece. Their enemies knew that pain, fear, and even familial loss couldn't rattle a Spartan. The usual weapons of psychological warfare were useless. The circuits that made other men vulnerable had been rewired into indifference. Research on cognitive reappraisal confirmed the mechanism. Reappraisal is simple. You change the story you tell yourself. You kill the emotion at the root before it grows into a crisis. Suppression doesn't work. It's like holding a beach ball underwater. Exhausting, and eventually it escapes. Reappraisal changes the shape of what's underwater in the first place. Someone insults you. The old circuit fires rage, but you intervene before the full response develops. You think, their opinion is irrelevant to my actual life. The new interpretation produces a different emotion, or none at all. The Stoics practiced what they called premeditation of adversity. They'd imagine worst-case scenarios repeatedly. Loss, failure, death, betrayal, the destruction of everything they valued. Not to depress themselves, but to process the outcome in advance. They called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. When the dreaded event arrived, the amygdala didn't spike. The situation had already been mentally rehearsed. The shock was gone. The Stoic who's imagined his house burning down 1,000 times doesn't panic when he smells smoke. He acts. The samurai took this further. In Hagakure, written in 1716, Yamamoto Tsunetomo declared, "The way of the samurai is found in death. When it comes to either or, there is only the quick choice of death. If by setting one's heart right every morning and evening, one is able to live as though his body were already dead, he gains freedom in the way." They mentally died each morning. They visualized their own death until the fear of it dissolved. This wasn't nihilism. It was the systematic removal of the terror that unsteadies most men's. A samurai who's already accepted death can't be threatened with it. The rebuild process is methodical. Choose one trigger, a situation that reliably produces an unwanted emotional response. Maybe it's criticism. Maybe it's being ignored. Maybe it's a specific tone of voice that sends you spiraling. Identify it with precision, then expose yourself to it repeatedly while practicing a new response. This isn't comfortable. It's not supposed to be. The Spartans didn't build their legendary composure by avoiding discomfort. They built it by walking into discomfort until it lost its power over them. Counter-conditioning works. Extinction of old responses works, but only through exposure combined with a different reaction. The old pathway weakens from disuse. Every time you don't take the bait, the circuit loses strength. Every time you practice the new response, the new pathway strengthens through repetition. The brain doesn't care which circuit wins. It simply strengthens whatever you use. Brain scans confirm this. Long-term meditation thickens the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational control, and shrinks the amygdala. The architecture literally changes. MRI studies of mindfulness practitioners show reduced stress reactivity as neural real estate shifts from the emotional alarm system to the executive control center. Consider social criticism. It triggers defensiveness in most people. The old response, justify, argue, attack, seek validation. The new response you're installing, silence, observation, strategic evaluation. When criticized, you pause. You ask yourself if the criticism contains useful information. If yes, you extract it. If no, you discard it. You respond, or don't, based on strategic value, not emotional reflex. Practice this response 50 times. The circuit changes. What once triggered you becomes data to be processed, rather than an attack to be survived. Stop. This is where theory becomes practice. What follows are 3 protocols. They're not suggestions. They're not things to consider. They're drills. Execute them, or remain a slave to your own wiring. When the spark hits, when you feel the first flash of anger, shame, or fear, you have exactly 3 seconds before your brain's negotiation protocols activate. By the 4th second, your amygdala has already constructed a compelling argument for why you should react, why this time is different, why they deserve your rage. You must move before the negotiation begins. In those 3 seconds, name it. Say internally, "This is anger." That single act engages the prefrontal cortex and hits the brakes. Don't negotiate. Don't analyze. Name it and let it pass through you like weather. 1, 2, 3. Name it. That's the window. Miss it, and you've already lost. This is attention training, building your capacity to resist impulse. The Spartans didn't wait for resistance to find them. They went looking for it, not to punish themselves, but to train the mind's ability to override automatic reactions. Every day, choose one small moment of mental resistance. Delay checking your phone by 10 minutes when you feel the urge. Sit in silence for 5 minutes without seeking a distraction. Hold your tongue when you want to interrupt. Let an email sit for an hour before responding. Each instance is a repetition. Each repetition weakens the circuit that demands instant gratification and strengthens the circuit that chooses deliberate action. You're not testing your endurance, you're training your attention to ignore the itch of an impulse. Start today with one delay, one pause, one moment of chosen stillness. For 1 week, write down every time you were emotionally hijacked. The situation, the trigger, the response, the aftermath. Most people have no idea what sets them off because they've never mapped it. You can't rewire a circuit you haven't identified. After 7 days, you'll have a precise list of your vulnerabilities. Then you systematically desensitize, one trigger at a time. Get a notebook, label it, start tracking tonight. Neuroplasticity works both ways. Negative habits rewire you toward weakness. Every time you indulge the rage, you strengthen the rage circuit. Every time you seek validation, you deepen the dependency. But deliberate practice rewires you toward sovereignty. The choice of which direction you go is made in every moment of reaction. Recognition, detachment, reconstruction. These are the steps. You now have the drills to rebuild the architecture. But what happens when you actually take this unshakable mind into a room full of people trying to provoke you? In Phase 4, we'll reveal why the most strategically advantageous thing you can be in any negotiation is a man who's disconnected his buttons. There's a final state. The Spartans called it apatheia. The Stoics called it ataraxia. We call it mastery. The state looks like this. External events trigger no automatic emotional response. You observe the stimulus. You choose your reaction in real time. The old program still exists somewhere in the neural basement, but they no longer have administrative access. Thermopylae, 480 BC, King Leonidas, and 300 Spartans faced certain death against Xerxes' Persian army. The Persians numbered in the hundreds of thousands. The Spartans knew they'd die. There was no question. This was a suicide mission designed to buy time for the rest of Greece to prepare. A Persian scout is sent ahead to observe the Greek position. He returns with a puzzling report. The Spartans are calmly combing their long hair and exercising. They're stretching. They're oiling their bodies. They look like men preparing for an athletic competition, not an apocalypse. Xerxes is confused. His advisor Demaratus, a former Spartan king, explains, "This is what Spartans do when they're preparing to fight to the death. No panic, no desperate last prayers, no signs of fear at all. 300 men facing certain annihilation, grooming themselves with the tranquility of an ordinary afternoon. This is emotional sovereignty in its purest form." The situation screamed terror. They responded with calm. The external reality was death. The internal reality was control. The Spartans had a saying. The Spartans don't ask how many are the enemy, but where are they? Numbers were irrelevant. Odds were irrelevant. The only question was, where do we fight? Julian Rotter developed the concept of locus of control in the 1950s. People with an internal locus believe their own actions determine their outcomes. People with an external locus believe fate, luck, or other people control what happens to them. Emotional sovereignty requires a completely internal locus. How I feel is up to me, not influenced by me, entirely determined by me. That's the claim of mastery. Not that difficult emotions never arise, but that you can dismiss them at will. They're guests in your house who can be shown the door. The samurai called this state Heijō-shin, calm mind in ordinary and extraordinary moments alike. As Inazo Nitobe wrote in Bushido, the soul of Japan, a truly brave man is ever serene. He is never taken by surprise. Nothing ruffles the equanimity of his spirit. In the heat of battle, he remains cool. In the midst of catastrophes, he keeps level his mind. A samurai composes poetry in his final hour, facing his end with absolute composure. This isn't indifference to death. This is control so complete that even the final moment can be met with aesthetic composure. The mind remains the master, even as the body prepares to die. The outcome of mastery. You're no longer reactive. Press the buttons all you want. They're no longer connected to anything. This isn't just peace. This is power. Every manipulator operates on one assumption. They can provoke you. Their playbook depends on your reactivity. Every tactic assumes you have buttons they can push. When those buttons are disconnected, they have nothing. Watch what happens when you don't react to provocation. The manipulator escalates, then falters. They try harder, they get louder, and then they realize, this person can't be moved. This person can't be controlled. This person is operating on a completely different level. A person who can't be triggered is a person who's strategically superior. They're unassailable. In a world where everyone's trying to control everyone else through emotional leverage, the unshakable man holds the ultimate advantage. He plays by different rules. He can't be baited into mistakes. He can't be destabilized by pressure. He can't be bought with flattery or broken with criticism. This is why manipulators throughout history have struggled against the stoic, the monk, the disciplined mind. You can't threaten a man who's already accepted loss. You can't bribe a man who's conquered his impulses. You can't destabilize a man whose self-worth isn't up for negotiation. Emotional sovereignty isn't passive. It's the highest form of strategic strength. Quiet, patient, unassailable. A 2023 study on Shaolin Zen monks found that despite age-related brain changes, monks who'd meditated for decades didn't show the typical decline in emotional processing. Their brains had been preserved through practice. The architecture can be maintained, and it makes you untouchable. Consider the Spartan mother's test. When their sons went to war, they told them, "Come back with your shield or on it." If their sons died in battle, they rejoiced. If their sons survived a defeat, they hung their heads in shame. This wasn't cruelty. This was the understanding that honor matters more than comfort, that certain things are worth more than survival. That emotional attachment to a child's physical safety is a weakness that can compromise values. The Spartans trained this response. They conditioned mothers to feel pride in a warrior's death and shame in a coward's survival. The natural emotional programming was overridden with something harder. The final truth: mastery isn't a destination, it's a practice. The Spartans trained daily until the day they died. Marcus Aurelius wrote his reminders nightly. The samurai meditated daily, even in peace. Sovereignty isn't a trophy, it's a discipline you maintain through repetition. Skip the practice, and the old wiring reasserts itself. The amygdala is patient. It waits for you to stop paying attention. You now have the framework. The question is whether you'll use it day after day, when no one is watching. Whether you have the discipline to rewire yourself, or whether you'll continue running software that was installed without your consent. You have a choice. Build the fortress, or remain exposed. But understand what inaction costs you. If you don't take control of your inner architecture, someone else already has. Every manipulator who's ever provoked you, every voice from your past telling you you're not enough, they're living rent-free in the space you refused to fortify. An empty fortress isn't neutral. It's an open invitation. Emotional sovereignty is the ultimate form of power, the kind no one can strip from you, no matter what they take. Subscribe if you haven't. We're building a sanctuary for the unshakable.